Morning, everybody. My name is Jae Oh. I am the author of Maximize Your Medicare. So while I'm trying to get everything, correctly set up, you'll forgive all of that. I'm also an education fellow at the Alliance for Lifetime Income, protectedincome.org. I don't think that there's any question about it here today, which is that let me just turn down the volume over here to make sure that the stream works. So thank you for your patience here today. I don't think that there's any doubt, which is that today, these days are going to be incredibly riveting. Exciting is probably, is too strong. Meaning exciting means, fun or something. There's nothing fun here. Let's make no mistake. This is very, very serious. I could not tell you, of a situation that I recall which has this many ramifications to this many people. There have been other financial crises in the past that grabbed the headlines and grabbed the investor base and kind of blew over, too technical for people to understand. This one, however, affects everyday people, and it will be doing so around the world. And I don't think that there's any question about that. Let's start in Switzerland here. For example, so this is the Jay's Corner newsletter. Please subscribe. Here's how I'm describing. These are the 5 points I'm going to try to get to. I'm obviously going to have to pick up the pace. Here we go. So this is the latest here from Switzerland, which is Credit Suisse, a bank that very few people in the United States would know is on the verge of failure. There's no other way to put it. The world's banking system, the world's banking community is on maximum alert because Credit Suisse, while not known to everyday Americans, is one of the globally most important banks. And this is a list by FSB, which is kind of like a keeper, if you will. And you can see the list down here. Chinese banks, of course, Bank of America, Barclays, Bank of New York Mellon, BBVA, which is a Spanish bank, BNP, French, and onwards. Down here also is then Credit Suisse. There. The reason it's this important is because the things that everyday people do not see, will not know, is the fact that Credit Suisse has agreements with all of these other banks on this list and has relationships with large global investors around the world. If it fails, the cascading effect it would have would be catastrophic. Just, I cannot put it more simply than that. Because, let's say, for example, and let's take a very easy example. Let's say you lent money to a friend, and that friend went bankrupt. They couldn't pay you back. You owed another party money for your credit card bill. You couldn't collect from your friend. You can't pay for your credit card bill. You're stuck. The problem wasn't yours, right? Your friend had a problem, right? He thought he was going to pick the winner, and he thought that it was going to be Arizona for the NCAA. Well, guess what? It's not only his problem now, it's yours. It's your problem. And this is why these banks do not, the banking system does not live in isolation. So the world is watching very carefully here. For me, I have said I will state it again, that this location, what has happened, for example, at Silicon Valley Bank, was not the top source for me of what could create a calamity. Because instead what it was is something like this. Something like I just described between you and your friend and the fact that you own a credit card bill. I've used the wrong hands, I realize. Right? Which is that it's not the fact that your friend wrongly picked Arizona. That is going to happen. The issue is that you're the one who still has to pay the credit card. As a result, if you cannot, it's not only them, you're the one in default. Now, let's say there's 100 friends. They all can't pay me. I can't, and I've got 10 credit cards. I can't pay any of them. Let's say I'm cloned. Now the credit card issuer can't receive. And on it'll go. For that reason, to be candid with you, it's been sleepless. Because of the fact that this has global ramifications, the headlines are coming around the clock. There's no other way around that. I'm not complaining. How'd this happen? The reality is I discussed it here. January 27th, Jay's Corner, 2022, last year. I wrote that this is a copy of the newsletter, which I said withdrawal can be worse than the addiction. And what did I mean by with the addiction? I meant, of course, to our favorite picture. We got addicted to our too low, too stable. And when this happened and it starts to turn, what ended up happening? Silicon Valley Bank, Credit Suisse. So much so that, of course, over this past weekend, we watched last weekend, it's like just different versions of the same theme. We saw this. We saw the fact that Janet Yellen had to pull out a bazooka. And I mentioned it here. Janet Yellen pulls out the bazooka. It didn't work. That's the issue. And as a result, the world was looking for what's next. Who's next? And it found it. In other words, it became revealed that, like I said, the 100 credit card banks also have a problem. We're going to discuss how that happened, and we're going to do so here because you can see what ended up happening is that these mid-sized banks, which are big banks in your location, they're big banks in your location. Of course, First Republic is the one with the headlines, but there are more. Huntington Bank, for example. It is inside of this mid-sized bank. I'm not going to get into naming names and things like this. I'm going to talk about understanding, try to explain how we got here. So now let's go back to our example. You're borrowing from a bank. The bank is going to ask you what? Let's say you want to borrow $50,000. The bank's going to ask you what? They're going to ask you, show me proof of income. Tell me what assets you have. They want to know what your collateral is. Right? Meaning, if you don't pay, what can I get as collateral? This is something that everyone knows. Everyday common people, not involved in Wall Street finance, not involved in interest rate derivatives as I have been. It's a simple exercise. What are they going to say? How much cash is in your bank account? What's your checking account balance? Show it to me. You own stocks and bonds post-tax? Show it to me. Common questions. It's simple. But then they're going to ask you, and those are liquid. You know how much it's worth that moment. That moment. You pick up the phone, you click twice, and in a day where financial markets aren't haywire, you know pretty much how much that is worth very accurately. But then you start to write down other assets. And I have called this, for example, the value of a coffee mug in other videos. And I've got a simple example here. This is a brass elephant that I bought in Mumbai, India, at a market, a bazaar market, next to the hotel. It was an underground market in Mumbai, very famous place. And I bought this brass elephant. It has traveled with me around the world. The issue is the bank is going to ask me, how much is this worth? Now, candidly speaking, this is not $50. I definitely didn't. But the real question is let's say that I have to pay back my $50,000 loan. They're going to take my cash if I have it. They're going to take the savings. They're going to take what's in the brokerage account. Let's say you've burned through all of them. And now they're going to ask, what's this worth? The problem here is, in fact, these banks have that type of assets. They don't know how much this is going to be worth, and they certainly don't know what it's going to be worth when it's a fire sale. Right? Let's say you like the elephant. You can send me an email, tell me your bid. Right? I promise you it's not going to be very high. Right? You can say, hey, cool elephant from India. It's like a thing that I bought at some like shop that, in some weird antique shop or something like that. Are you going to bid $5,000? You're not. You're not. I've revealed to you that I haven't paid $50 for it. And, this isn't Storage Wars, right? So as a result, okay. But under stress, you want to have something maybe might be cool. Are you paying $50? You're not. You're not. I promise you, you're not. If you are, info@gh2benefits.com, right? I mean, that's just common sense. The problem here is that the U.S. mid-sized banks are full of these types of assets. My view here is that, for beyond the headlines here, is commercial real estate is a huge problem. People work from home. They've abandoned the offices. Drive around at big cities, mid-sized cities. You'll see it. Offices available. Offices available. Every location. I'm very sure of it. That is held. Those assets are not out there for sale like your checking account and savings account. They're sitting here with my elephant. If I had to describe for you then what the kick save is, the kick save is to buy them time. It's there to buy the bank's time. And we're not going to get about haircut and collateralization, etc., and a bunch of technical terms. But what it basically is buy them time so they can get a number here. We have no idea if this is 50. We have no idea if if I'm going to be the next person on Storage Wars. We certainly don't know how much cash would show up in my account if I put it up for sale. By the way, you can also now see the problem for those of you who own like 5 Airbnbs, right? With borrowing rates with variable mortgage rates. That's a problem. That's a problem. You don't know how much your rental property is worth if you had to liquidate. For that reason, this is what has happened. This is a request that came over the weekend, yesterday, I want to say. We are yet to see. I would expect, very much so, that once we are beyond here, which is going to be crazy, this is going to happen today. We're going to have an announcement here. We're going to have some kind of announcement, is going to be my guess here, about mid-sized banks. If we do not, risky assets are at enormous risk. Yes, that means stocks. That means other speculative assets. By the way, my valuation is going to be even more inaccurate here. So now you can see, you're the bank trying to lend me money. How do you value it? You don't have a good way. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. Now, I'm going to stop there for very technical yet very accurate descriptions of the technicals of what is going on. This is a person that you can depend on. He is from my background, meaning that, I don't know this person. I've read he is the one who said, investing without understanding the bond market is like having soup with a fork. In other words, he's talking about the understanding of the denominator. Not surprisingly, confirmation bias, you can guilty as charged. Correct, but guilty as charged on confirmation bias. Here, this person, very highly qualified and very, very non-political, in the sense of, we shouldn't, that, this is fair, as people who know me have heard me say. Fair is a place where you judge pigs. We're here now. The reason that most people don't necessarily know what is going on or necessarily feel this is sitting quite frankly here. So I'm going to switch up the bullet points. This, and people from the newsletter know this, right? You can see here. This is Vanguard, and this is a very common type of structure which exists in IRAs. For example, maybe your company has a 401k, and you'll have a BlackRock version, a Fidelity version, a Vanguard version, sure. And you can see 2.06 year to date. 2.06. This is awfully darn good. My view here is real good. Now let's just take a quick look at the allocation, right? So a couple of things that, we're not well beyond today, right? You can see 45% stock, 46% U stock, a lot of international stock, 30%. I didn't look at this before today. 20% bonds. Over here, I've described it. Let's see if we can play it. Not only, I've misspoken. The denominator stable. This bottom part here, R, right, is interest rates. What has basically happened so far in 2023 is you've had stable-ish R. That described this great beginning, which can only be called surprising. That's why you can see the thumbnail there. Can it last? I was skeptical, given what was going on on the world. The information about the banking system is not unknown. This is known. So my point here is that with that as the backdrop, the fact that we had this kind of a beginning that I pointed out on a prior version of a newsletter, and that we are still here at 2.06 on a consolidated basis is very, very good. everything considered. Now, that said, it has become more difficult. Notably, that number has been sliced in half. It's here, which is, this shows you, remember, when I've showed this diagram, this formula, what I've said are two things. It's not only level of R. It is the amount of up and down, volatility of R. So the reality is interest rates are much lower. R is lower. That should help NPV, which is the price of risky assets. We'll get to that in a moment. But you can see here, this last portion on the far right, you can see this tremendous spike here of the amount of up and down. You could see it here, dropping, dropping, dropping. Not coincidentally to followers here, right? If you had just followed, we're not setting or predicting. We're observing. If you had just seen this, you get your explanation. That has now reversed course, notably. So, with that as the backdrop, let's just continue back over here. Let's just see if we... Oh, no. So let's go back to our summary here. So now, the issue is, how are we going to sell my elephant? The ripple effect is going to be on Jae's Rib Shack. The ripple effect of the fact that we have had to sell our stocks. We have had to give our cash. We had to give our checking account back to the bank. Right? So now I'm a bank. The issue is, now I'm here. And this is my only collateral. You can see it on last week's broadcast. This is an exact version. This is exactly what I wrote. I didn't change anything. I only highlighted the yellow. That now I go to the bank. Tomorrow, if I go to the bank and try to borrow the same $50,000 from mid-sized bank, I'm going to have a problem. Why? Because they're going to be asking, what's your collateral? And they're going to be looking at this a lot more carefully. They're going to be, what is this thing? What is this elephant? Oh yeah, by the way, you've got other assets? This is a vase made in Korea. Celadon, which is the color, you'll know it. They're going to be asking, what's your collateral? The reality is, for most persons, that means that the attempt to lock in borrowing is now going to be restricted. Jae's Rib Shack isn't able to borrow easily. This will restrict financial activity. The addiction we've had to low interest rates, the addiction we've had to the massive amounts of liquidity, the only logical conclusion, is that lending standards much more difficult to you and I for Jae's Rib Shack. There's no doubt. And we have seen that in rates, of course. You see credit card rates over 20% in many instances. That looks to continue. And I don't think that there's, to be candid with you, I don't think that that is a matter of debate. This is the problem for everyday people. Because, again, we've been addicted to the availability and the low amount of interest rates. The low level of interest rates. Low level of interest rates. I'm like psychobabbling here. Okay. So we're going to continue to have these types of headlines. You can see it. I'm a subscriber to Bloomberg. And you can see, for example, this basically tells you how difficult this is. Silicon Valley Bank is closed. For all intents and purposes, as a depositor, you can pull out your money. But the reality is they're looking for a takeover. The federal government, the regulators are looking for a takeover, for someone else to own the assets. They've been trying for a week. They don't have a solution yet. A week. Around the clock, people have been looking. They've been looking, okay, he owns an elephant. He owns a vase. What's it worth? Can we get a price? No has been the answer. So in other words, this is not over yet. Nowhere close to over. Okay. The issue this has for portfolio strategy is back to here. So again here, this is Henri. This is the thumbnail. Right, which is this curve over here. As you can see, Jay's not making it up. I'm pretty sure. Right? In other words, this little picture that I've shown here in the lower right, this is how these portfolios get built. There's only one technique to get to this type of portfolio. And I'm showing you and trying to explain it to you. All of these moves has changed. And what I'm watching is to look at the relationships here, because now we've got an issue, right? Because you can see it when we're talking about here. I'm going to be looking for the headline here today, which is the reason these are linked is because the mid-sized banks are asking FDIC to insure deposits for 2 years. I'm not sure if this is kind of like choosing amongst evils. This looks like reasonable. And it is. I agree with that. The issue here, of course, is that there's a market for liquid securities, and a lot of them for these 2 years. So now you're going to be comparing 2-year borrowing of Jay's Rib Shack. You could buy a bond that I sold for 2 years, or you have a federally guaranteed deposit for 2 years, irrespective of size. It will skew. It's going to change the relationships. It's going to change the relationships in the efficient frontier on the correlations across, which is the glue. And you can see this is from Portfolio Analyzer. That wasn't it. Something Analyzer, a video that I've shown you in the past. This is that grid. Again, that's the glue to create these pictures. My point here is that when these banks, we're going to get an announcement. I'm very confident we are going to have some confidence restoring, in an attempt to restore confidence, right? So you don't all rush and pull your money out of your local bank. That what ends up happening is this type of measure is going to have a ripple effect over here, almost for sure. An unintended consequence. As a result of that, that is very likely, not certainly, but likely to change your combinations over here. And then, therefore, the then resulting performance. Now, if that sounds complicated, there's a reason. It's more complicated than I've just stated, not less. Let's just take a look here. Why have markets reacted this well? Let's just take a look. This is Q. I call it Q, right? This is the NASDAQ 100. This is the NASDAQ 100. Let's see if I can get this to behave. So this is the NASDAQ 100. I'm going to try to get the year to date. Yep, we're getting there. So here's the year to date. This is against SPY, which is the S&P 500. You can see much better. And this is a huge difference. This is a 10% difference between QQQ and S&P 500. Let's just take a look over the past month, and you can see it dramatically here. Right? Over here, for example, you think this isn't very much. Minus 2.7 to plus 1.4. This is 4%. Remember, the professional market is in tenths of a percent. This is 4 full percent. In other words, the competition over here and how accurate the estimates are for this, and the performance here. A point I've made, and all of this. And even with that, you have seen a dramatic outperformance. Even more dramatic, and you can see it as explained by, this is an equally weighted index. And you can see even a more dramatic number here. This is a full 10%, everyone. RSP, this pink one at the bottom, right? This is the equal weighting, meaning that Apple has the same weighting as Jay's Rib Shack. That's the pink. And you can see what has happened as a result of the banking crisis, which is two things. Number one, the small banks included in here with equal weight to Apple. Number two, these persons also understand in financial markets that Jay's Rib Shack can't get liquidity to borrow. So their earnings projections, whatever that was over here, right? Now this is basically why I've kind of kept us here in the seventh inning. I've known that we have not seen the ripple effects from this up to whether or not it would affect Numeratorville. Right? In other words, their earnings projections about Jay's Rib Shack, they're wild and they're going to be wrong. Okay? We just look at high to low, for example, on any big company. Even under big companies, it's enormous. But what is not yet fully known is just how affected Jay's Rib Shack would be. We still don't know. What we do know is in this environment, investors have shot first and asked questions later. And so the full explanation to most of what has happened over here has been as a result of and the 2.4% has been that because of this weighting, they didn't equal weight, but they market cap weighted. So the Apples, the Microsoft, the Google, the Meta, Tesla, they got more weighting than Jay's Rib Shack. As a result of that, when you add it to this and you can see what has happened, now you can piece together how this has outperformed. The reality is that if you have got like a portfolio from an advisor and got like 10 mutual funds and things like that, I'll find it very, unless you had like growth, something specific to QQQ. Yeah, you could have been this. That doesn't mean that anyone's a hero here, because now the question is, okay, it is very unusual to diverge to this degree with this speed. This is very unusual. To those persons who have had NVIDIA as a line item, congratulations to you, right? No question. and you'll see it here. You'll see the winners. Let's just take a quick look. I'll show you. So this is Apple, right? Largest market cap, and you can see it right there. That's the top line. And that's doing poorly, by the way. That's not the star, of course. You can see, of course, NVIDIA. I'm not going to say anything about this other than I saw a great quote the other day. Okay. AI is not going to replace humans, but humans who adopt AI are going to certainly replace humans who do not adopt AI. And I don't care what your profession is. It's if you haven't gotten the memo and you're a millennial, you're my age division, even at my age division, if you don't adapt to this, you're going the way of the dinosaur. That's just the way it's going to be. I've ripped even at quicker pace here today than I expected. I'm going to just talk about one last thing here. Where is it? It's on Mr. Let's go see if we can see Mr. X. Did I blow it away? I think I did. I tried to keep it tight because I realized that it's difficult to watch for an hour. It's difficult to watch for an hour. And I'm not talking about it. I will end with Medicaid. So what I did here, and too small for you to read, is basically what happened is I captured the correlations looking backwards. I knew that this was an issue. As I said, we pointed this out 2 years ago now, right? That this is certainly the technique, no question. I didn't come up with it. Engineers will know what this is. This is portfolio optimization with constraints, right? To a linear algebra, professional, they're looking at this and shrugging their shoulders for sure. An engineer will understand at least the terminology that I'm using. They will understand it better than I do, for sure. Here is the inputs on the correlation. You can just see what has happened. It explains how difficult 2022 was, right? Which is basically AG, which is the bond market. IVV was the ticker they used for the stock market. You can see that both going in the same way during this difficult time. That's basically stocks down, bonds down, portfolios minus 20%. That's what happened. Because prior to that, under prior 10 years, you can see these were negatively correlated, which meant what? Stocks up, bonds down. That also meant the other way. In other words, the two balanced each other, at least a little. Here, they stopped balancing. They went in the same direction. When stuff goes in the same direction, then it's time to take note. Meaning that diversification, right? You always hear, don't put all your eggs in one basket. That's a shortcut. That's a shortcut. What it is, diversification works as long as the grid works. What end up happening is people skip step, and the step that they skipped was to describe the fact of what? They forgot to describe the glue to you. If the glue malfunctions, then all bets are off. What you thought was diversified wasn't. And in fact, then what would have told you? It meant shut down the number. Not shut down your not shut down your allocation stocks versus bonds. What I mean is shut down the number of line items, because extra line items for diversification's sake, that doesn't work under duress. If I had to say the number one source of financial distress ultimately is what we believed, what you believe is the combination, relationships between this egg, for just as an example, and stocks, for example, this. What you thought was the relationship breaks down because if one thing goes wrong, we can fix it. We can hedge it. There's an instrument out there to hedge it. When something goes wrong on correlation, the issue is there's no hedge. There's no protecting you. And as a result of that, instead of a diversified portfolio, put it all in that breaks down. The entirety breaks down. And you know this in real life is the reality. You do. I'm very sure of it. I don't like trite sayings. When it rains, it pours. In the same way, we're looking here at individual line items and how they fit your situation. Because I'm thinking through the effect of what? I'm thinking through correlations of instead of stocks or financial markets, what is to say this isn't income? Right? 401k. Oh, healthcare costs. Right? In other words, I'm looking to try to make sure that your combination of different inputs in everyday life don't break down. And the reason I'm trying to make sure they don't break down is because I just have one job. Max Green. Period. I spent 30 minutes or so, right? We're almost done. I've spent 30 minutes talking about the most technical stuff. This is deep in the weeds. I'm not talking about interest rate hedging, interest rate swaps, and the accounting and treatment of that. Yeah, I can decipher all of those statements for you. The reality is for everyday people, what it is about here. Okay, now we've got to have this balanced set of stuff. That didn't mean diversified for diversification's sake. No, I did not say that, right? That wouldn't be consistent with what I'm saying. What I am saying is I'm measuring your spot here and this combination of inputs so that you get the highest green that you can possibly get in a world of uncertainty. As you can see here, we've got a world of uncertainty. That's all I've got for today. If you like today, please like, subscribe. JaeOh.substack.com. JaeOh.substack.com. That's the newsletter there. Contact details there. You can ask me what you want. No problem. I'll be able to, I will take my best shot, be able to answer to you quickly.